The 21 Sacraments for the Descent of the Holy Mother is a ritual invented by the Silent Hill-based cult The Order. It is a series of sacrificial killings that, once completed, will revive the god of Silent Hill and bring about the Order's paradise. To our knowledge, the 21 Sacraments have only ever been attempted by one person, a disturbed man who was orphaned as a baby named Walter Sullivan. So, how about we take a look at how Walter's attempt at the ritual turned out? Let's examine the sacraments, step by step, one victim at a time.
Oh man, sorry about that. Just getting into the spirit of the season, I suppose, but there's no way I could talk like that for a half hour. You're gonna have to deal with my usual grating voice for this one. Before we begin, let's start with what all 21 victims share in common, so I don't have to repeat myself over and over. Number 1. All victims have a 5-digit number carved into their flesh upon death. They look like this. It's fairly obvious that the numbers are a blank out of 21, but the game treats that revelation as if it's a plot twist. Characters in the game act as if this reads 0, 1, 1, 2, 1 instead of 1 out of 21. I'm not sure how you could interpret this incorrectly. Number 2. All victims, barring one special case, manifest as ghosts upon their death. These ghosts are invincible, immortal beings that inhabit Silent Hill's otherworld and try to kill anyone they come in contact with. Just being near them is enough to cause agonizing headaches. Not every ghost appears in-game, but I would guess this is because Silent Hill 4 seems unfinished. And the ghosts, much like tons of missing lore, probably just weren't implemented before the game's release. Number 3. All victims leave behind an artifact upon their death. There doesn't seem to be any purpose to this aspect of the ritual. Perhaps the object is what's haunted, if you get what I mean. Maybe the spirits of the victims are tied to the last object they touched. Got it? Good. Let's get started. The 21 Sacraments begins with the 10 hearts. 10 victims whose only link in their murder theme is that their hearts had been removed after death and the killings had to be done in a 10-day time span. No details are given as to what Walter did with the hearts, but we can assume there was some sort of altar or special location they had to be placed. Victim 1. Jimmy Stone. A priest of the Order with the nickname The Red Devil on account of the red triangular hood he wore while punishing people. This outfit was very clearly inspired by Pyramid Head, or maybe it's the other way around. That's a theory for another day. It's rather interesting that Walter's very first victim was a member of the Order, who, taught him the ritual in the first place. His ghost is the one that appears most often in Silent Hill 4, to the point where he's actually featured on the box art. Jimmy was killed when Walter shot him in the back of the head. He left behind a piece of scripture upon his death. Victim 2. Bobby Randolph. A high school student who was fascinated by the occult and eager to meet Silent Hill's devil he had heard all about. There's not much to him. In fact, we don't even know exactly what he looks like, other than he was a chubby black guy. Because, while we can assume he did become a ghost, the protagonist of Silent Hill 4 never encounters him. Bobby was strangled to death in the woods and left behind a book on the occult afterwards. Victim 3. Sein Martin? What is this name? Anyway, Mr. Martin's details are identical to Victim 2, save for the fact that he was a skinny white guy. He was also strangled by Walter and left behind a camera. Victim 4. Steve Garland. A pet shop owner who may or may not be related to Lisa Garland, a nurse character from other Silent Hill games. When Walter was a kid, he entered Steve's pet shop and accidentally hurt a cat that was meant for an important client. Given that his profile states he's quick to get angry with people, it's likely he became furious at the young Walter. This would later on prove to be a very poor decision, as an adult Walter returned and murdered Steve with an SMG, along with every single animal in the store. Steve's ghost is unique in that it's the only basic ghost to use a weapon, that being a small spade he used to clean up after the animals. The spade was also the object he left behind. Victim 5. Rick Albert. A bland one here. He was a sporting goods store owner who left behind a volleyball as his artifact. His ghost doesn't appear in the game either. Walter bludgeoned him to death with a golf club. Next. Victim 6. George Rosten. Another member of the Order and recipient of terrible karma, George not only implanted the Dark Angel Valtiel into Walter's head, he's also the one who personally taught Walter all about the 21 Sacraments and how to perform them. While he has no visible ghost, it's theorized he is the spirit trapped in the burnt talking doll that's featured in a puzzle near his murder site. George was killed with a steel pipe and left behind a book of the Order's teachings. Victims 7 and 8. Victims 7 and 8 are that special case I mentioned earlier, Billy and Miriam Locane. The Locanes were very young children when Walter killed them, and they are in fact the only children Walter killed. Both were murdered with an axe in front of their house, but Miriam was brutally dismembered. There's a reason for that we'll discuss later. The Locane children are special in that they don't create a ghost upon their death. The pair instead manifest as the Doubleheads, a reoccurring monster enemy. Now, I have two possible theories on why this is. One is that Walter feels some sort of guilt towards killing innocent kids, and considering Silent Hill monsters are created via a person's subconscious fears and sins, that may explain the Doublehead's existence. The other, less interesting idea is that Team Silent simply couldn't justify the protagonist beating up what would appear to be a child's ghost. They had already gotten in hot water for something similar in the first Silent Hill, where the Grey Children enemies were removed from the European and Japanese versions of the game. Unfortunately, this seems more likely, given there was already a change like this in Silent Hill 4. In the beta or some other early version, the Doubleheads made disturbing, realistic baby noises, whereas in the final game, they just make deep grunting sounds. Billy left behind a shoe, while Miriam only left a lock of her hair. Victim 9. Another boring one. William Gregory was a clockmaker who was given a watch to repair by a man in black who we can guess was Walter. That night, William had a nightmare with strange imagery involving places where Walter's other murders took place. The following day, he was stabbed to death by Walter using a screwdriver, which is also his dropped artifact. His ghost doesn't appear in the game. Victim 10. The final of the 10 Hearts, Eric Walsh. Eric was a bartender in Ashfield, a town near Silent Hill. After the death of Steve Garland was discovered and the perpetrator was revealed to still be on the loose, Eric left his job early and headed home, where he was greeted by what looked like a surprise birthday party. Well, it was a surprise, alright. Walter was waiting for him and shot Eric in the face. Eric's ghost appears in his home, where he was killed, pinned to the ground by a weapon called the Sword of Obedience. The sword doesn't kill the ghost, but it's the only thing that can keep them stuck in place, so it's for the best you just leave the sword in him instead of removing it. Eric's artifact is a cue ball from a billiards table. With the 10 hearts now completed, we move on to Step 2, the Ritual of the Holy Assumption. This step consists of only one victim, and that victim is Walter Sullivan. The details here are a little hazy, but here's what I believe happened based on some info hidden not in Silent Hill 4, but in a newspaper article in Silent Hill 2. Walter, using the powers of Valtiel that were given to him by the Order, possessed a random man into pretending to be Walter Sullivan. It's possible Walter actually used this man to commit 2 of his murders, as it's stated that the man was only arrested for murdering the Locanes, not any of the other victims. Surely the real Walter would have been tied to all of the murders, not just those 2. In the end, this man killed himself in prison by stabbing open his carotid artery with a spoon. Before his death, the man said this:
"He's trying to kill me. He's trying to punish me. The monster, the red devil. Forgive me. I did it, but it wasn't me."
But all that doesn't mean Walter didn't kill himself. Walter performed the Holy Assumption by killing himself in a hidden space in the titular room 302. I'm not sure if he somehow nailed himself to a cross and that's what killed him, or if this was done later. Regardless, Walter completed the Assumption and gained the power of heaven, granting him control over Silent Hill's otherworld and splitting him into 3 parts: his rotting corpse, a ghost version of his adult self, and a ghost version of himself as a child. These new powers would allow him to continue his sacraments in a much easier fashion. You may be wondering at this point what Walter's motivation could possibly be. He killed all those people and himself. Why? Is he just insane and wants to bring about paradise that badly? Well, he is insane, but the Order's wishes don't seem to hold much sway over Walter. He's much more selfish than that. Walter was abandoned in room 302 of an apartment complex called South Ashfield Heights. Because it was the first thing he remembers seeing, Walter came to view the apartment itself as his real mother. Well, more like a womb, really. There's a lot of birth imagery in this game that suggests this. Walter was rescued by Frank Sunderland, the apartment's superintendent and father of Silent Hill 2's protagonist, James Sunderland. Baby Walter was taken to a hospital, then adopted by people from Wish House, an orphanage that was secretly run by the Order of Silent Hill. As he grew up, the Order abused and brainwashed young Walter, preparing him to perform the 21 Sacraments. This made Walter a sad, depressed, and broken young man who wanted nothing more than to return to his mother. Dahlia Gillespie arrived at Wish House one day and promised to Walter that if he completed the 21 Sacraments, he could be with his mother again. That was all the motivation Walter needed to begin his killing spree. Walter went to med school and obtained some form of degree that certified him in performing operations, presumably so he could conduct the 10-heart step efficiently. You can find him performing some form of surgery on a woman's body in the hospital world. I don't have a clean way to fit this next bit in or a proper transition to it, but it's an important little detail for you to know before we move on. Walter is rather misogynistic. In case you're somehow unaware of that word, that means he hates women for being women, the inverse of this idea being misandry. Anyway, how do we know Walter is a misogynist? I mean, he just kills people, right? Well, aside from his otherworld being littered with torn up and stabbed female mannequins, it's all in his murders. We'll discuss the other specifics when we get to them, but whenever Walter murders a woman, it's incredibly violent. Not that killing someone isn't inherently violent, but he takes extra personal rage out on females. Remember Miriam and Billy? Well, they were killed at the same time, but Billy was killed with a single axe swing, whereas Miriam was brutally dismembered and hacked to bits, so much so they could only find part of her torso and bits of her hair. One would guess Walter's hatred of women stems from hidden feelings of abandonment from his birth mother, as well as the nuns and Dahlia from the Order who treated him like shit from the day he was born. Walter's left-behind artifact was a soup spoon he used to cut his throat, allegedly. With Walter's new ghostly form, he was easily capable of performing the final step. Step 3, the 10 themes. Each of the following murders has their own unique theme, and the victims are people who represented said theme to Walter. Victim 12, Peter Walls, a high school student and a pothead. He represents the theme of void, presumably because unless he was high, he was a dull coward with no backbone or personality, like an empty void. He was apparently just beaten up by Walter until he died on a roof somewhere. I feel like this is just a cop-out because they couldn't think of another interesting death. Obviously, he left behind a joint after he died. The only interesting thing about him is that the ghost enemy in Silent Hill Book of Memories is based on his ghost design. Victim 13, Sharon Blake. A housewife with family in the Order, she represents the theme of darkness. I'm gonna guess because she was kept in the dark in regards to her family's lives and their part in the Order? Sharon went to Silent Hill one day to find her family, only to discover her son's grave. Walter apparently drowned her, but there are no details to how this happened, only the cause of death written as drowning on her page, which is odd. Her ghost is awful bloody to have only drowned, so it's likely Walter attacked her in some other way first. Sharon's artifact was a black hat she was wearing when she died. Victim 14, Toby Archbolt. Yet another Order member, and probably the person who deserved his murder the most. After the deaths of Jimmy and George, Toby used the disorder to ascend through the ranks of the cult and eventually, somehow, became a member of Silent Hill's City Council. He began to deal drugs on the side to increase his influence and make more money for the Order. If that wasn't bad enough, he was also a pedophile, with his profile listing his interests as underage girls. Walter pushed him off the side of a cliff in Mexico, leaving behind a picture book. The theme of his murder is gloom. A drug-dealing, Satan-worshipping pedophile who abuses children would certainly make Walter feel gloomy about humanity. Hard to be optimistic about other people when you're surrounded by monsters like that your whole life. Now, from this point on, all the victims are people you encounter and interact with during the course of Silent Hill 4. Every victim before this is dead before the game begins. So these profiles are going to be longer than the previous ones. Victim 15, Joseph Schreiber, an investigative journalist who functions as a sort of false protagonist in an interesting way. Silent Hill 4 opens with you controlling a character in first person, inside a heavily possessed Room 302. The character is very confused about the state of his apartment, not recognizing most of the belongings around the room, you know, aside from the haunted shit. After realizing you aren't getting out of this room anytime soon, you're attacked by the ghost of Jimmy Stone and subsequently killed. It's later revealed that you weren't playing as the protagonist of Silent Hill 4, you were actually playing as Joseph Schreiber. Joseph moved into Room 302 sometime after Walter killed himself, and mysteriously became trapped inside. From this point, Joseph goes through the same thing you go through in Silent Hill 4. He uses a strange hole that appears in his bathroom to travel to Walter's otherworld and encounters the various victims, investigating Walter and the Order in the process. He leaves tons of messages and hints for you to find that help throughout the game. In fact, these pages you've been seeing are from a website called Another Crimson Tome. The Crimson Tome being a series of notes of red pages that Joseph had written. Okay, sorry to interrupt the video, guys. Quick aside, I had to create this while I was editing the video. The website that I got the translated Crimson Tome from, translatedmemories.com, has disappeared between me writing the script for this episode and editing it. And I can't find any backups anywhere, so I don't have any pictures or credits or anything for it. I would love to credit the people who translated this stuff, but the website is just gone. If you happen to know who it is, who translated and uploaded it, or what happened to the website or anything like that, I'd appreciate it if you could leave a comment down below so I could properly credit the people who helped me create this video. This video probably wouldn't exist without translatedmemories.com, and it's just sort of disappeared. Anyway, back to the video. Sorry for interrupting. Joseph is the only ghost who is not malicious, instead giving our protagonist important information as a black mannequin on the ceiling. The theme of Joseph's murder is despair, probably relating to the despair Joseph must have felt, being trapped in a twisted apartment, tossed back and forth between dream and reality, knowing with certainty from his research that an otherworldly spirit was coming to kill him, and there was nothing he could do. Joseph, obviously, left behind his journal, the Crimson Tome.
Who are you?
Henry. And you?
This is my dream, and you don't even know my name. It's Cynthia.
Victim 16, Cynthia Velasquez.
That's right.
And I'm going to be blunt here, slutty 20-something woman who met Walter long before his murder spree began. When they were both younger, Walter thought she was beautiful and would watch her from afar when she entered the subway where Walter lived after Wish House. One day, Walter attempted to talk to her, but being, well, a smelly homeless man, Cynthia and her friends wrote him off as a creepy stalker, made fun of him, and ran away. As we've already learned by this point, you do not insult Walter Sullivan. A grown-up Cynthia is the first person our protagonist encounters in the subway where her and Walter met. She assumes that she's dreaming and promises to screw our protagonist within a literal minute of meeting him.
I'm kinda scared all alone. I'll do a special favor for you later.
Classy lady here. Cynthia becomes suddenly sick and separates from the protagonist. After a series of dogfighting shenanigans, you find Cynthia's belongings scattered around a closed door. These belongings are her artifact, by the way. You open up the door and...
Are you okay?
It's just a dream, right? I think I drank too much last night. I never got to do that special favor for you. I feel like I'm dying.
Okay. It's just a dream.
Notice how violently attacked she was. She's absolutely covered in cuts and blood, and just left to bleed out. This would have taken a lot of personal hatred and effort from Walter, when he could have just stabbed her in the throat or heart or something. But John, that's because Cynthia personally wronged him. Perhaps, but others who hurt Walter, like Steve, along with the 3 cult members who literally tortured him his entire life, were killed with relatively quick and effortless methods on Walter's part. Anyway, Cynthia's theme is temptation for obvious reasons. Her ghost is unique in that it doesn't fly like the others. She slinks along the floor with her long black hair, similar to an onryo, which most will be familiar with from Ju-on, aka The Grudge, or The Ring.
So you came to investigate this stone too? There was another guy here before, a real nosy guy. But I was the one who found the stone first. In the old days, the natives called it Nakihona.
Victim 17, Jasper Gein. A friend of Victims 2 and 3, and similar in pretty much every way, he was with his friends looking for the devil when they were killed, but Jasper escaped. Not unscathed, though, as the experience left Jasper with nervousness and a stutter from PTSD. He had spoken with Joseph Schreiber during Joseph's little excursion through Walter's world, and was given a spade with a message on it that Jasper later entrusted the protagonist in exchange for...
That nosy guy gave me something really good. I could let you have it, but not for free. I'm really thirsty. I'm so thirsty. Oh, chocolate. Oh. Oh man, that was awesome.
chocolate milk.
Here, take this.
Yeah, Jasper is rather odd. So odd, in fact, that the protagonist never talks to him. I mean, they converse, but it's just Jasper talking at you rather than a back and forth. After some exploring around the woods to find a key to enter Wish House, Jasper follows our protagonist inside, and, well, he really shouldn't have done that.
I finally met him! The one the nosy guy talked about! The devil!
Jasper's murder theme is source. What this means isn't clear as the others, but it could be Jasper was a source of information, given how much he knows about the Order, and the fact he had witnessed Walter's murders firsthand. He was also a source of fuel for the fire, but that seems a little far-fetched and silly. Speaking of fire, that's what makes Jasper's ghost unique. He cannot even be contacted without damage as he eternally burns. This makes him, in my opinion, the #1 candidate to be pinned with a sword of obedience, so you don't have to deal with him anymore. Also, his last name is an obvious reference to Ed Gein. Jasper's left-behind object is a fucking chocolate milk bottle, of course. Victim 18, Andrew DeSalvo. Another serious candidate for most deserved murder here. DeSalvo was the warden of the water prison, a monolithic concrete tower where the kids of the Order would be sent when they misbehaved. It's exactly as awful as it sounds. Walter was, of course, sent here before and was subjected to torture and abuse at the hands of DeSalvo. He would torture all of the children, regardless of whether they had actually done anything wrong, and the kids had taken to calling him Fat Pig. Our protagonist first encounters him bitching about being trapped in a cell.
Get me out. Get me the hell out of here.
He refuses to talk to you in this state, so after releasing him, Andrew sees an apparition of young Walter, which causes him to freak out.
Make me stand in there anymore. Make me stay in there. Get me inside. Take me inside. Make me stay in there. God, please. God, let me out of here. So I didn't die in here. Make me stay in there, Walter. Walter, I'm telling you, stay down. Walk away.
Who is that boy? And who are you?
His name's Walter. Walter Sullivan. I used to work at the orphanage watching the kids. I'm Andrew DeSalvo. They tried to make it seem like an orphanage, but according to that town's holy scriptures, it was actually the center of their religion. And that kid Walter, he was really into that mumbo-jumbo. Especially that descent of the Holy Mother business. It was scary. Oh, God. Oh my God.
After going through the most annoying level in the game, and finally making your way to a hidden body disposal room behind the kitchen, that has some disturbing implications, our running theme appears once more. Mess with Walter, and you die. DeSalvo's theme of murder is watchfulness, and luckily there's another obvious one. His ghost is unique in that he's fat! And uses that fat to bump into you. Ugh. DeSalvo's artifact is his bloody shirt he wore before Walter drowned him.
Ouch! Damn it. Where the hell am I? You're a real person. Hey, you're the guy that lives across from me.
Yeah, my name's Henry.
I'm Richard Braintree, from 207.
Victim 19, Richard Braintree,
Happened to us.
an easily angered resident of South Ashfield Heights who, while not overtly evil or anything, is irritated when things aren't going his way. He likes to have control of the apartment complex, making sure the other residents comply with his ideals of a peaceful life. He would yell at little Walter, who was commonly seen creeping around room 302. He's first encountered in the building world. That's actually what this section is called.
That hole in this freaky world. But if you're here too, then there must be something wrong with the whole apartment building. That must explain what happened to that other guy too.
What other guy?
The guy who lived in 302 before you. A journalist. He disappeared one day. He got pretty crazy towards the end. Shut himself up in his room and wouldn't come out. Anyway, I'm getting the hell out of here. You should too, if you know what's good for you.
Wait. Watch out for that kid.
I think it's funny that our protagonist, whose name is Henry by the way, I think I forgot to mention that, has learned the correlation between the child Walter and people being killed, and warns Richard to stay the fuck away from him. The two split up to look for a way out. You don't see Richard again until you catch a glimpse of him as you descend an elevator.
Are you the kid he was talking about? You live in that apartment too, huh? Say, you look a lot like a little punk that I once caught sneaking around there. Do you know something about what's going on? Hey, you! Stop!
Oh, crap. That's not good. Yep, that's about right. Richard's theme of death is chaos, which I assume is ironic in a way. Richard is so hell-bent on order, but he achieves that through being a chaotic asshole about it. His ghost is another tough one. He moves very quickly and warps around while making loud electricity crackling noises, meaning you should probably use a sort of obedience on him too. Richard leaves behind his revolver, which you can actually acquire as a weapon later.
Hope my luck changes before the party.
Victim 20. Eileen Galvin. A relatively normal young woman who met Walter when she was a little girl. Eileen and her mother were out shopping for her father's birthday when she noticed the miserable teenage Walter sitting in the subway homeless. Eileen felt bad for him and offered Walter her doll to make him feel better. Eileen's mom quickly pulled her away from the strange man as she waved goodbye. Walter sat there, watching Eileen and her mother leave. A happy child and their mother. Walter began to cry uncontrollably. Eileen is the only person in his entire life who had ever shown him any kindness or compassion, which does beg the question as to why she would be chosen as a sacrament. Perhaps the god was testing him, seeing if he could kill the one person he cared about in order to bring paradise. Eileen can be seen throughout the game, actually, either through the peephole of room 302 or through a hole in the wall that Joseph had carved out to try and escape before he was killed. The protagonist has no direct contact with Eileen until the end of the apartment world, having spent the entirety of the level trying to get a key so you can get to her before Walter. But when you come back to the door with the key...
Did you find your mommy? This place, it's dangerous. You need to hurry. Get out of here.
Now, despite being severely beaten by Walter with his bare hands, Eileen was actually saved by young Walter due to his feelings towards her. This is supposed to be a surprise, but within 5 minutes of seeing her death, you pick up an item that's described as an Eileen-only weapon. That kinda gives away that she's alive.
Eileen, relax!
Henry? From next door? What are you doing here?
And I saw you get attacked too.
What are you talking about? I'm supposed to believe that?
But it's true. And there was a kid with you.
The boy protected me from the man with the coat. I'm sorry I didn't believe you.
Once you find her in the hospital, she follows you for the rest of the game, and it's awful. The less said about it, the better. During this time, she is occasionally possessed by Walter. Letting her take damage results in her being even more possessed, and making the boss fight at the end of the game potentially impossible. More on that later. Eileen represents the theme Mother Reborn. I guess because Eileen was kind to him, much like Walter views his mother, you know, the apartment. She leaves behind her handbag as an artifact, though you return it to her eventually.
What the hell?
Victim 21. Henry Townshend. The 21st Sacrament, Henry Townshend, is the protagonist of Silent Hill 4. Henry moved into room 302 after Joseph and became trapped inside just like him. No one can hear him, and no one can enter. His television also doesn't work, but his radio does, not sure why that is. After a few days of this, Henry starts becoming desperate and enters the strange hole forming in his bathroom wall. This hole brings Henry to the various other worlds that he visits throughout the game.
I don't know where to start. There was this strange hole in my room. I saw people getting killed. All these weird other worlds.
Henry has no ties to Walter, and only appears to be targeted because he lives in room 302. This is actually supported by the fact that Walter doesn't appear to harbor any ill feelings towards Henry. He just views killing him as something that needs to be done.
I got this from Miss Galvin. A long long time ago. She was younger than me back then. She looked so happy, holding her mother's hand. Here, I'll give it to you.
He casually converses with adult Walter, and kid Walter never reacts negatively to him. Henry's a victim of circumstance. As the witness to Walter's killings, and the one trying to find a way to stop him, Henry's theme is the receiver of wisdom. Henry isn't terribly interesting. He's very quiet, reserved, and serves more as a vessel for the player to view the other characters in the world. He's pretty brave for fighting all these monsters, and he does try to help Walter's victims before their deaths, so he is a good person. He also seems to have something forming with Eileen. It's unknown what Henry would have left behind had he been killed. I would guess the room itself would somehow be his artifact, or maybe just whatever weapon he's carrying at the time.
Hey there, little Walter. Just a little longer now.
Henry, you're it. The last of the 21 Sacraments. The final sign. The receiver of wisdom.
So, after all that, despite Walter's best efforts, he's unable to kill Eileen and Henry, leaving the god's body, which was formed from Walter's corpse, incomplete. Eileen is totally possessed by being in such close proximity to Walter, who makes her walk towards this elaborate death trap. The speed at which she walks is determined by how much damage you let her take, to the point where it will be literally impossible to complete the boss with her alive if she was hit too much. Walter is still an invincible ghost, so Henry has to focus his efforts on the god protecting him. After impaling the god with enough spears, Walter will become vulnerable, and after emptying enough rounds into him, and so, the 21 Sacraments goes uncompleted. Kinda anticlimactic. There is a bad ending, where both Eileen and Henry die, but all that happens is young Walter enters room 302. You don't get to see anything interesting, like the birth of paradise or stuff like that. Considering the world, still exists in the Silent Hill universe, that means the good ending is canon, where Walter dies and room 302 is no longer haunted. So ends the 21 Sacraments. Well, that's it for the spooks today. Thanks for joining in. This was supposed to be a Halloween video, but stuff happening in real life prevented me from finishing the video on time, so it's probably going to go up a couple days after. I'm not sure when. But if you want to see something really scary, I just finished my 2-part review special of the awful mess that is Silent Hill Revelation. I'll leave a link to part 1 on screen if you're interested. Well, thanks for watching, everyone, and enjoy your Halloween, I guess. See ya.